Rims have fainted out Sturtevant on the side. Tim, I'm planning on recording this. I'm assuming you are too.
Yep.
So I'm going to start my recording.
All right.
Did you start yours?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Today's date is the 22nd of January. We're here on 60th Street for an interview of Matt Haerter, and it is 10:47 start time. We have a officer here from Sturtevant, correct?
Sturtevant Police Department.
Sturtevant Police Department. Frank Gagliardi on the record, Matt Haerter on the record, and your name again, sir?
Captain Tim O'Neill.
Thank you.
Again, Captain Tim O'Neill. It is January 22nd. Can you state your name?
Matthew Haerter.
Can you spell it for me?
Sure. MATTHEWHAERTER.
And your date of birth?
9 July of 74.
Okay. Before we get started, I will read you your statement of rights. You are hereby ordered to fully cooperate with the investigating official, myself. Your failure to cooperate will create an objective and subjective fear of termination. You have the following rights and responsibilities during the investigation. You have the right to be informed of the allegations involved. You will be asked questions specifically directed and narrowly related to the performance of your official duties. Statements made during any interviews may be used as evidence of misconduct or as the basis for seeking disciplinary action against you. Any statements made by you during these interviews cannot be used against you in subsequent criminal proceeding, nor can the fruits of any of your statements be used against you in any subsequent criminal proceeding. If you so request, a person of your choice may be present to serve as a witness during the interviews. If you refuse to answer questions relating to the performance of your official duties, you will be subject to dismissal. Do you understand these rights that I have read to you?
I do.
Okay. You need to sign here stating that you understand that.
Before we get started with the official interview, Tim, I got a question for you. Is this a internal issue, or are we seeking criminal allegations?
This is an internal that's being done for Kenosha Fire.
Okay. And why would I'm just so I understand the political aspect, or the
I was
internal
asked to do the
aspect.
internal,
Yeah.
and I am conducting the internal.
Okay. How come Kenosha
That's
Police Department
has nothing to do with what I'm doing here.
Okay. I just trying to
Yeah, I know.
understand the whole thing.
It's
22nd.
the 22nd.
I'm just gonna take a picture of that for documenting purposes. Okay. Thank you, Tim.
So, do you have any idea why we're here today?
Only Chief Leipzig talked a little bit about a couple issues, but otherwise, no. I haven't really been informed of exactly what's going on.
Okay. We're going to go over a couple of different issues here. I will basically just kind of tell you what I'm looking into and try and enlighten me and give me any information you can on these issues, all right?
Okay.
Let's see. July of last year, there was an issue where there was a dog brought to work. Could you tell me anything about that?
Just open-ended.
Yeah, open-ended.
I have an extremely well-behaved, trained Labrador that's shared between myself and my son.
Mhm.
And I normally don't have the opportunity to have her when he's not around, but I did. And so it was a weekend. I don't know what day of the week it was. So I brought her to work. She stayed with me in the office and with the apparatus, and accompanied me for the shift, and then went home the next day.
Okay. Is that a normal occurrence?
I don't think it would be something that could, for me, it's not considered as being normal, but sure, I've seen dogs in the station ever since I've been here.
So it's, is there any policy that you're aware of, or
No.
any kind of procedure for bringing an animal to work?
There's no policy that I'm aware of that prohibits it.
Is there any policy that you're aware of, Tim?
I'm asking the questions here.
I can ask
Okay.
the question too. I'm.
You're here as a witness. You're not here as a participant. So there's no policy, no procedure for bringing an animal to work. Have you brought an animal to work before?
No, sir.
Never?
No.
Okay.
No.
Have you since?
No.
Do you remember talking with the chief about this incident?
I do.
Do you remember advising him that you had brought the dog before?
No. No. The dog had not been. The dog was at work for. No, because it was before the July 4th weekend. I'd been training with her, but no, I don't remember bringing her to work ever, other than
Okay.
that single time.
Or advising the chief that you had brought
No.
her previous?
No, definitely. We talked about the past history as far as the past administration.
Correct.
And okay, so I just want to clarify. I'm talking about Chief Leipzig.
I asked you if you had ever brought the dog to work previously.
No, I talked to Chief Thompson about starting a program, but I never had actually brought the dog to work after that point. The dog was here one time. Chief Thompson, the previous chief prior to Chief Leipzig, I had a conversation with him about that, but it never came to fruition. He started his departure shortly after that, and I continued my work with the people I had been involved with to hopefully understand a little bit better on the fire service therapy program.
Okay.
But no, once Chief Leipzig said he didn't want it brought in again, then I didn't.
Okay. So you never advised the chief that you had brought the dog in previously with any administration or anything else?
The only thing that I both talked to the chief, and I know that we corresponded briefly on it, was that I had spoken with the previous administration about a dog program starting for the wellness of our members and our customers.
Okay.
That under the previous administration, no, the pup had never come in.
Okay. No, you think it would probably have been a good idea to talk to him previously or before bringing the dog in, to just bring the dog in?
Well, Captain, honestly, I certainly have never kept track because it hasn't been anything that's been on my radar in the past. I've found dogs at many of our firehouses, some of which have been there for a transient period of time, some of which had been kept for a day or two. And this has never been something that has been a problem. My dog is exceptionally well trained. It's gone down the route of being considered as far as for entering into the therapy program. And I knew I wasn't going to have an issue with her, regardless if she was here with me. And so, no, it wasn't something, obviously I couldn't start a program without his blessing, but I wanted to see if this was something that even had proverbial legs before I started it.
Okay.
Or approached it.
This didn't have anything to do with there not being dog care available for the dog. It was purely based on the fact that you wanted to start a stress management program or a...
Right. The
It,
dog...
it had nothing to do with that your wife and child were out of town and that you didn't have proper daycare for the dog.
No, she follows them anywhere. They were out of town, but she could have easily gone with. And she has upwards of 10 different neighbors that take care of her on a regular basis. There is never an issue with finding a place for her to go.
So is there any reason anybody else would have lied and said that you advised them that you brought it in because you didn't have daycare for it?
There's no reason I would have said that.
Okay. All right.
I know that in the future, one of the benefits and one thing that we talked about, and I know that I told this to Chief Leipzig as well, to hopefully give you a little bit more information that I think is honestly pertinent. Because the dog does follow my son and will stay with my with his mother, it leaves me without the opportunity to have anything like that at home. And one of the side benefits of starting this program and obviously taking the expense and the logistics on myself is to have the opportunity to have that again. But I can't have one unless I can actually have the dog here and while trained at work. So it's a side benefit.
So you don't specifically remember having a conversation with BC, is it Bernhard, concerning the dog?
I relieve him in the morning.
Okay. And do you remember having a conversation with him about the dog?
I remember that. I mean, obviously, I wasn't hiding it. The dog was present, and I know we talked about that. He knew that I had interest in doing something with the past chief, and we chatted about that, and then exactly what I told you as far as the benefits of if this would actually come to fruition, then I could have one with me at all times, and at least have one at home again.
But you don't recall talking to him about not having dog care at the last minute and bringing him to work because you didn't have any place else for him to go?
No, because that wasn't the case.
Okay. All right. Next thing I want to talk about, switching gears a little bit, is an overtime issue that was filled via you. It was grieved by the union. Would have been June 10th of 17. I know I'm giving you dates. I mean, I don't know if you recall, and I'm not even asking you to recall specific dates.
Approximate dates are good.
Yeah.
We talked about this.
So in June,
Excuse me.
June 10th, it shows that you filled an overtime shift, a 24-hour overtime shift. It was the union's contention that it wasn't done correctly. Could you just, first of all, just kind of go through or run through how overtime shifts are assigned for me?
I remember the issue well. This was a typical 24-hour and short-list overtime hiring. It's one of the positions within one of the jobs within our position that we have to do this on a daily basis. Some days are simple, some days are not.
Mm-hmm.
This particular one garnered a lot of effort due to there being not only many people on scheduled leave, as far as, and I don't remember the number, but the 24-hour leave, and then more troublesome being on short-term leave, which could be any time during that 24-hour shift. When they're absent, that position has to be filled, and if we're at minimum staffing, that person has to come in, and work overtime. They're either held over or they're called in at a specific time during that next day. 24-hour positions are normally filled typically, unless the union changes their mind on it, are filled from the day that is working today. So I hire from today's staff to fill tomorrow's roster. Conversely, the short-term staffing that has to be hired for that next day or 2 days, and I can't remember if we're doing 1 or 2 days in advance, because it changes, is typically hired from the people who are here, who we have access to. They have first right of refusal. We then go to off-duty people and start hiring them off of that. The process by which we do this is the union affords us a paper binder that has a list of everyone on one of 3 shifts. So we have A shift, B shift, C shift, like your first, second, and thirds. I hire then from the shift that I'm working on for the next day. I hire 24 hours first, and after I have my 24-hour shifts filled, then I hire my short list. The way that we go about this to understand who's actually working is that we have an internal scheduling program, essentially, that is as accurate as the information that's entered into it. So if we have at the time that I do the staffing, which is throughout the day, and then we firm it up in the evening, we will print out who is at work and then cross-reference that with the 24-hour overtime list and hire from who's at work. We don't hire people who are off duty for the 24-hour shifts unless it's a holiday. After those 24-hour shifts are filled, then you go to the shortlist opportunities that are present. Very, very frequently, as you go through that process, there's what we call deferrals. So the individual who you call, just because you happen to be at work today, I can't force you. I'll say, do you want to work? And you say, no, I'm going to defer because I have a day off next day, or it's going to put me at 3 days in a row, or there's a bunch of different contractual reasons you can defer.
Okay.
So then I go to the next person, That particular day, I know with the amount of people who we had off, I know we had, I believe, upwards of 20-ish deferrals when I was calling around. If we're at minimum staffing, we're at 36, so that leaves 16-ish people to fill the slots. I don't know how many I was filling that day, I don't recall. After we fill those 24-hour spots, then we go to shortlist. And normally if we have an issue with filling the long list, it traditionally also causes a washover into there being an issue for hiring the short list, because if people don't want to stay for an entire shift, they're not going to come in the middle of the day for 3 hours.
Understandable.
Right. So, but it's not always the case. Sometimes people would prefer it. So then I went through that, and obviously got to the point where it was difficult to hire that as well. I got to the end of the hiring process, which I don't know what time that actually ended as far as in the evening. I know that it was 3 or 4 hours duration as far as going through this. Once we got to the point of getting everything firmed up for the evening, in the morning, I believe somebody called in sick, if I recall correctly, and so I had to fill another 24-hour spot.
Okay.
It was my belief I don't have it here, so I can't show you, but if you imagine every one of these lines on this paper, on this legal pad, is a name. On that list I print out, when I call them, I put an X through them so that I know that I already called them.
Okay.
Oftentimes, if we have
You do that for the 24-hour list or the short list?
the short list is a forever book that we don't get rid of at the end of the day, so you put a tiny little pencil mark next to it. Unfortunately, there's a lot of pencil marks that are erased and everything else. So this 24-hour list is my own piece of paper, and I get rid of it. And it also helps me keep track, because you may be calling people in order, but if they're out on a call and you know you need to hire 6 people, and you're going down and you can hire these next 3 before you call those first 3, then you're going to do it, because you know you're going to get to them anyway, regardless of doing this. So you go through, and that's the process that I've used literally for 12 years in this position.
Okay.
I got through it. I hired it. In the morning, somebody called in. I believe they called in sick. I can't recall. And it left me with no one left on that list to ask. The list was exhausted. People had either contractually deferred, or they had said no, which they have the right to do. And in my belief, I had a 24-hour shift list that no longer had the ability to use anyone off of it. Our plan B for that is that if you have a need to hire overtime to meet the mission of the department, and we don't have anyone to do it off of that list, we have to go back and then, it's just distracting, I'm sorry.
I reported a strong smell of natural gas from a building at 6226 14th Avenue, 622614 Avenue. Companies to respond: Engine 2, Engine 3, Engine 5, Med 3, and Truck. Correction. Truck 3 and Battalion 1. Fire clear at 11:07.
If we get to the end of the list and we have a need to hire more people on the 24-hour list, we can go by lowest seniority and order somebody to stay at work. I've only ever done it once in 12 years, and it was on Christmas Day when somebody called in sick. It was forever ago. So obviously that's not something that you want to do to somebody to disrupt their plans or their livelihood or their whatever else they have going on with their family. So I activated what's called our all tone, where you have dispatch put out a tone just like you honestly just heard for that gas alarm. They call and they say, I think if 24-hour overtime is available, if you're interested, contact Battalion 1. My goal with that was to see if I could find anyone who had changed their mind, who was available, who, if scheduler happened to be incorrect, anything like that. So I got a call quickly from, I think I ended up hiring two. I got a call from an in-house captain at Station 4 here, and then I got a call from A.O. Almond, who had previously turned down overtime the day prior. And Captain, I think it was Captain Shuby, if I remember correctly, said that he would work it, and then A.O. Almond said that he would work it, and the issue was essentially solved. The union took exception with the fact that I had used the general tone because it's not something that we typically do for the procedure. That's it. It could go on a lot longer, but that's generally how we do it.
Okay. So that's the process you followed this time.
Yes, sir.
You did the short list first?
No, we do long list first.
You did long list first,
Yes,
then
sir.
you did the short list?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you went over the complete long list right away? And then you said you went back and filled the short list, or tried to fill the short list, and then when nobody took the 24-hour or the long shift, you toned it out.
When I went through the long list that I had available with the printed out people who were in scheduler, when
it was either deferments, refusals.
I literally would D or cross off if they weren't at work or anything else, and I had a list of everyone who was at work on my list was crossed off.
Okay. There's no possibility you missed anyone on the list?
There's always a possibility.
Okay.
It was my belief that I didn't, and that's why I used the general tone in the morning so that I could make sure that I caught.
Okay.
But it was my belief that I went through and had hired everybody who had said that would say they would work.
And you went through the long list first?
Yes, sir. You hire 24 hours first,
Okay.
and then you do short list.
Okay.
Because 24-hour people have the ability to get more overtime. That's how the union wants us to do it.
Okay.
Now, please allow me to clarify quickly. If you hire 24 hours, you fill your spots, and then you end up with short list that you hire after that point. The next day, if somebody calls in sick, it is not at all uncommon for us to allow somebody who had said that they would work short list to work that 24-hour shift if they're next in line. This, however, was a situation where literally when I looked at the list, I had nobody left to call. And that's why I sent that out there. And if nobody took that, then it was going to be the
Okay.
the
And
force.
you're aware of the grievance, correct?
Oh, I am.
I mean, multiple people stated that they were never called for the long list. and that they were called for the short list earlier. Never heard from the long list, and it was then toned out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what is your response to them?
Again, what I function off of is literally, this is something that I've done almost every day at work, every year for 12 years. So to the tune of 100 times a year times 12 years. I followed the same procedure, and we've had different programs, and I cross people off. If I crossed off the individuals who said they were at work, who were in that system,
Mm-hmm.
and they said no or they had a deferral, that's what I did. If somebody is saying they're called, or if somebody was off on a trade and entered their name into the system 5 minutes after I printed it out, there's a possibility that I honestly wouldn't even get them. However, that situation is always extremely unlikely, because when you get a call, we have a house phone at each engine house. When that phone rings, and stereotypically it's never the person you need to talk to who answers it, that person says over the PA, Matt Haerter calling the fire line is for overtime. There's an absolute understanding that overtime is being called, and it's very unlikely for anybody who's working in that house to not know that it's occurring. So even if it happens to be somebody there for a couple minute trade, or somebody who came in late because of some other arrangement.
So you're saying there's a possibility that these people that were not called were not on your list?
If I truly did not call them, there's obviously a reason why they weren't on the list, or that I didn't call them. It was either that they weren't on the list, or that they got crossed off unintentionally. There's absolutely zero benefit for me over the period of 3 to 4 hours when I have to do this to make it last longer than it needs to be. I want to get people hired as soon as I can so I can get back to my job.
I mean, I'd like to know if those people were people who were out on calls.
I would be speaking on supposition. I wouldn't know that.
Correct. I just meant you had mentioned that earlier in your explanation. I was trying to follow the process.
It's antiquated, yet it's ours. So honestly, if I sat down and truly showed you how to do the entire thing, it would take far longer than what it just took me to explain it. But it was my belief that I had called everybody, and in no way did I intentionally omit somebody from that opportunity.
So we can move on. Next thing we'll talk about. There was a media statement that was issued by you concerning a fire. This was in July of 17. It was a barn fire, according to the news release here. I guess there was some problems with some apparatus at that. Do you recall that? It was, structure fire Friday, June 30th, 2017.
Just to be sure, is there a address or a report that I could look at, or a long time ago?
11,660th Street. It was
Okay.
a barn fire.
It's my report, right? I wrote it.
Yeah, I don't care if you look at
Okay,
it.
thank you. I just want
There you go.
to make sure that we're doing the right one. Okay, I'm familiar with this.
Okay. Guess go over whatever you remember from that day.
Ready?
Yeah.
Okay. It was it was a while ago. It was a call for a shed fire, West 60th Street here. Well involved, defensive on arrival, vacant, off the road quite a bit, which is something that we're fortunate to not have to work with very often. On the way to the call, engine 5, which is one of our north side engines, located up by Washington Bowl on 22nd Avenue and Washington Road, broke down and announced over the radio to dispatch. They said we've suffered a mechanical failure. I forget what verbiage they used, but like, we're dead in the water, we have to assign somebody else. It was a time when I know that we were busy already. We had other things going on, and I asked for, before I got there, before we had any companies who had actually arrived, I asked for Pleasant Prairie to respond with a engine company to assist us. They are from that particular firehouse where they would be responding from. They're essentially immediately southeast of where this particular call was, and the geography actually borders their jurisdiction. So we worked together a lot back and forth, and it was something that certainly wasn't out of the ordinary whatsoever.
Okay. Afterwards, you spoke with the media on that and gave a release. Can you tell me how that went?
I remember there wasn't a true press release on this one, as far as anything emailed or written from my recollection. I remember it being verbal. You're speaking of the Kenosha News. They are very irregular as far as how they garner information. It's very, sometimes they'll be at the scene, sometimes they'll call, sometimes a print editor will call at night to clear up a staff written story where nobody was actually even present. On this one, I believe they called, or they were at the scene, and I can't remember which one it was, but I think it was that they called. And I know that night there was an editor that called back. I think we had some other things going on that day as well, some other things of noteworthy or newsworthy. What also happens is that the editor will call and ask about a specific issue, and many times it's not our call. It's Prairie, or it's actually in Illinois, or did you go to this? Did you send something to this? That is also something that's fueled because they have a lot of people who contact them via the scanner feeds and via the Facebook feeds and things like that. So they often call us for clarification.
So do you happen to remember that night who contacted you and if they called, or?
From what I remember, we talked a couple of times, and I know that they called, the print editor I know called in the evening, and usually that's 9 or 10 o'clock, right before they send things off for press. Okay. But I had talked to somebody previously in the day, as I recall, they also called, or they were present out there, but I think it's that they actually called.
And you gave them the information that the rig broke down at that time?
I did.
Okay. Is that... I guess I don't know how you guys go about doing... I mean, we have policy at our PD on how we do press releases. Mm-hmm. Is there any oversight by your chief, or do you have full discrimination, full ability to write your press releases and then release them, or is he or somebody else oversee or proofread before you send those out?
If we have, if we elect to do a written one that's blasted out, it's gone back and forth a lot. We have the ability to do that, and we can from our position.
Okay.
It's generally not something. Basically, the rule that we function by is if it's an issue about something that isn't immediately regarding you. If I'm at a fire, if I'm at a wreck, if we have a rescue that I'm commanding, and the news wants to either talk on camera or do or have a press release or have more information about it, we're always free to talk about that. If it's something that is old, or something that obviously is going to go in a different direction because it perhaps involves personnel or something that we're not connected to, then that's something that we'll turf that off to the chief, or advise him that this is somebody who wants information soon, and we need to be able to act on it.
Okay.
But it is very, very common for us to talk to the news on a daily basis, extremely common, if we have things that are going on.
Did you see any problem in advising them that apparatus was broken down or not functioning properly?
Well, it's certainly not the best news. At the same time, it was something that they inquired about, and certainly the last thing that's going to put the department in a good light is if you try to hide something. But it was also very, very clearly made, and I know the statement was well articulated that sure we had a piece of apparatus that was assigned to the incident that was unable to fulfill its duties. That said, we have plans in place that immediately were able to rectify that problem, and there was no issue resulting from it whatsoever. No different than if that engine was already on a call and couldn't go in the first place.
Is that the focus on the media statement? Is that the focus on the question on the media statement is on the engine itself breaking down on that part of it?
Just how it was released. Also, you're positive that they called you on this issue.
Honestly, Captain, and this is what, July?
Yeah, June 30th.
Yeah, June 30th. I mean, because you said in your interview here with me and with your documentation to the chief and everybody else in emails that you were sure they called you, that, and if I'm wrong on any of these statements, correct me, that they asked you specifically whether or not the rig broke down, and you answered with a simple yes, and that was it.
Okay.
I'm just asking if those are correct statements.
I remember. I absolutely remember talking with him. You know, the information that I provided early on or provided to them as far as the news meant it to be truthful. So I know that's how I got in there, and perhaps after that night when the print editor called back is where they got the further explanation. And I can't remember when I talked to the chief if he had called that evening and he was informed about it, or if it was actually reading it in the paper and then we talked about it after that. So I'm sorry. It's a long time ago.
And the information was put out on broadcasted? I mean, the information about engine 5 being down.
They did that over the radio, and I know that was also on the different scanner feeds that are out there on social media as well.
Okay.
But again, there's no harm from it. It was rectified.
I mean, I could understand if the fact, I'm just, in my own thought process, I could understand if the fact related to like a causation of a fire, if there was an arson investigation going on or something, but if the question relates to a fact about engine 5 being broken down in like some type of a multi-department, you know, agreement that you guys, everybody helps each other out, and that's the proper procedures were called, and I just, in my head, I'm trying to understand that one.
No,
the issue. There's a couple issues here, and it's truthfulness, and it's getting into those type of issues. When statements are made and documented via email that you were contacted by these people, specifically asked these questions, and then we have phone records showing that the call to Kenosha News was outgoing. I mean, every phone in this place, as well as my department, it logs incoming, outgoing, time of call, duration of call.
Sure.
So which phone made the calls? So, I mean, phone records showing that it was outgoing calls from your line to Kenosha News.
Okay.
And then hearing you say that, well, they were the ones that called me right there, that's something that's not a truthful statement. And it's not just here now that it is months later that we don't recall the exact mode. It's noted in emails back and forth at that point in time.
I don't understand whether they called him or he called them. They called him or he called them when there's multiple phone calls going on. because he said that he talked to one person earlier in the day and potentially an editor later in the day. So there's multiple people he's talking to, and he's conducting the fire scene. I can understand how that could be confusing, whether my wife called me or I called my wife, or I called my client or my client calls me. I can understand what you're saying when it's reported and they're saying that, hey, you're saying that they contacted
and when
him.
it's specifically asked which way this conversation went, and there's an adamant answer one way or the other.
Sure.
I understand that people can get confused if there's multiple calls.
Yeah.
But when you're asked something specifically that close to the time of the thing, I don't understand how it wouldn't be easily remembered.
Okay.
Well, and
that's just me, I guess.
and again, Captain, I mean, that's while it's how I recall it. At the same time, it's information that was given to them in the spirit of telling them the truth and answering their inquiry truthfully, so that we didn't have anything to hide, and we didn't, and the call went fine.
Yeah. Are you aware of any policies or practices stating anything to the fact that you're not supposed to release anything that could be detrimental or shed the department in a bad light without first checking with the chief on?
I understand that we have that, and we have had many back and forths in regards to that, of timeliness and things such as that, where they don't want us to, if you have a question of this, do you have a broken down fire engine? They don't want the questions that are more open, as far as, if you would have a fire station at that corner, would you have gotten there sooner? Those are things that we don't get into. We don't get into hypotheticals. However, we have always been championed, regardless of the last 5 chiefs that I've worked for, to tell the truth and be direct, unless it's going to be something that is very, I don't want to even say detrimental. I want to use a stronger word. Very, very damaging. Where you have a fatality. You have something else. This was essentially a garbage fire that we were able to exploit our positive relationships with area departments, and the fact that it worked fine. And this is why we do this.
In the magnitude and the multitude of calls that you made to and from the media that day and everything else, did you ever pick up the phone and call the chief to ask his approval on it? Did you talk to him about that day about the apparatus being broken down, or run any of this by him that day?
I don't think I did. If I remember correctly, though, I sent him documentation or an email about what happened, and also about the fact, because we had another engine failure that was present there, that was not purveyed as far as out into the media, which I think shows the fact that obviously I wasn't trying to cause them to understand all the issues that we had going on. And I know that was sent to him. It was regarding engine 4 running out of water. I can't recall if that was something that I sent him to document a conversation we had, or if I just sent him that and I never talked to him on the phone. I'm sorry, I don't remember. It was talking about the mechanic coming to the scene and stopping with engine 5 first and getting them back to the station and things like that. And I don't remember the actual verbiage of it, but that's a generality. I'm thinking it was just an email. I don't think I called him.
Which he's probably got in his records.
I could find it. I don't remember who I sent that to. I know it was sent to him. I don't know who else it was. Prior maintenance.
Yeah.
Or if he was texted, or I'm sorry, I don't recall. Chief Leipzig likes doing a lot of things by text, and I don't recall if that was text or
Okay.
that way.
But yeah, you never thought to pick up the phone while you were calling the news or talking with the news or anything else. Is that something that you just don't do? You don't run?
If it's something that is absolutely significant, then we will bother the chiefs at home.
Okay.
With something like this and how seamless the transition was, it was not something that was on my radar for I thought we were making the essentially reinforcing the fact that the department had extremely effective Plan Bs and Cs in place.
Okay.
As a layperson, not being from the departments, I actually think that that's great. I mean, I've worked with some stuff in the county with our rescue areas and everything, and Salem Lakes and those guys out there, and how they corresponded with Twin Lakes, Randall, Wheatland, Silver Lake, and getting everybody to cooperate and communicate. When you got team backing each other up, that's a good.
We do it very frequently, and I'm fortunate to be the person who has coordinated a lot of that, so it works well.
Last one I'll talk to you about here is a fire that occurred the morning of, I believe it's July of 28th, which would have been 5610 55th Street, which you commanded a fire scene.
Can I see the report again, Captain? I'm sorry. Thank you. Is there a narrative portion of it that you have?
That's what I was given.
Just this. Just 1 minute, please.
There you go. This is what you're looking for?
Yes. This is only a small part of it, but okay, I'm familiar with this fire. Thank you.
Okay, the issue with this isn't the fire, it is the report following.
Okay.
So after you were done with this report, what is your policy on finishing reports? When are they due?
It's essentially within 24 hours.
Okay. Is that something that's written somewhere, or is that just a practice that's normally followed?
It's a directive. At the same point, we have cases where, for instance, I had a multiple fires on this last Labor Day that caused us to work throughout the day at different incidents. The first fire, we unfortunately had a lot of our personnel hurt. It was, I don't want to use the word impossible, but we couldn't keep track of how many people were actually turning in documentation, in addition to other individuals who had newly discovered injuries after they had gone on other incidents after that. We also had to discern what fire they got hurt at, because we had several going on at the same time, and they were all at the same fire, so it was difficult for them to do that. Cases like that, or software problems or anything else that will push out the allotted time, it happens. Or if I have somebody going home that's going to their an important event, if it's not a call of significance or something where they can do it, we will make a executive decision as a supervisor and allow them to turf off that responsibility until the next shift. It's something that happens.
Okay. This report, do you recall any problems with the ability to finish this report?
I remember that when, again, we were busy throughout this day, but I'm sorry, not Labor Day, but on this particular incident, this happened you'd have to look at the time again. It was 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, something like that. We were there until well after shift change. It was a report where fire prevention was still there on the incipient areas of the investigation. And like we were talking about before, as far as other obligations, I know that I was also staying over for the next chief who was coming in. I know that when I went for we call them NIFRS, National Fire Incident Reporting System, when I went to enter that particular, or begin it, we do our narrative in Word, usually so that we can spell check it and bring it over. We also then have that narrative that we're able to keep. And at the time when we were switching over to our new public safety software, we were having, I would say, what would be considered frequent issues with image trend, which is our reporting system, and the CAD bridge that was coming from fire. So if you look through that report, you'll see people on different pieces of apparatus, and you'll also see all the time stamping and the things that the dispatcher notes if you dig into different fields on that. On that particular one, I remember when I logged into it, it didn't exist in the CAD yet. So obviously we were there, it was a CAD call, we had CAD, we had on-scene clear, things like that, but it hadn't come over onto the actual fire part of it. That was something that I don't want to say had happened frequently, but I definitely had it happen quite a few times. And I remember that Chief Bigley actually called me. I was off, I believe, the next shift, and called me and asked about it, and I had told him, and he got a narrative, and then I finished it from remotely when it was up there again. That's something we've worked with Captain Shuki on again as well.
Okay. How does shift change work when you're on a fire scene call? If let's say the next PC comes in and comes over,
How does it work for me?
how does it work for your department?
Well, we can start with the department because it's different for us. The department will, if we have 10 rigs that are at this fire scene, the stations where they came from, obviously they won't be there when the people show up to work. They will wait until they have the whole entire group.
Yeah, I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm
Okay.
I'm talking your job
Okay, I'm sorry.
as a
You asked for the
battalion
whole
chief.
department. Okay,
I
I'm
said
sorry.
you said what, me or the department? So I
Yeah.
was figuring in my head I thought you do it differently than the department.
We do.
You're
Why don't you?
as your role as a battalion chief,
Okay.
how do you handle shift change? If you're on a call.
If we're at a call. Typically, we will stay there and the incoming chief will run the rest of town. Or relieve mutual aid chiefs that have been called in prior to fill that role while we're busy on that particular incident.
So basically, if you're on that call, that's your call unless you want to give it up.
It's really done as a courtesy to the incoming person. This is my mess.
Yeah.
And I'm going to write it out so that you don't have to worry about it. And it goes far deeper than that. They're clean. They're not exposed to carcinogens. They're working with their crew that hasn't yet started that day. So we really try to have that dividing line. Now, if we get back at 5 a.m, then right, they pick on up. But normally there's not. If we have an incident that large, we're essentially charged with staying there, unless there's something extraordinary. Why we wouldn't?
Okay. So you're saying that the CAD never populated the report.
The CAD is on their end. They can see it. Dispatch can look it up, and they can see that they have an issue that is sitting there. They don't use the software that we use for reporting, which is called Image Trend. So when we first started this out, as far as the system, and we don't have the issue happen anymore, it would oftentimes indiscriminately not send over multi-company agency calls. And we would go through our internal IT people. They would contact the dispatch IT people who would work with the software individuals, and they would figure out where the bridge breakdown was. And it got better after some updates. I mean, months ago.
Okay. And as you know, everything is time stamped in the systems, right?
Right.
As far as you understand. I have, stuff here showing the whole breakdown from image trend, showing that auto knifers from CAD was auto-populated when the call came out. So
Right. It will make the call. It forms it.
you said
But
in
that-
CAD, but then it won't do
But
it
it
in
doesn't
image
mean
trend.
it doesn't mean that we have access to it, and that was the problem that we were having consistently during that time.
Okay, if that's
it wasn't the only one.
case, then did you? Obviously, there's a way to report that computers aren't working, correct?
Right.
What is that system?
Well, it's way different now. At the time when we were going through this, we would call dispatch and ask if it was pushed, and they would do their best to look at it. And then, depending if we were working with, we call them IT specialists, but they're our internal people. They're not IT people. They're firefighters. Just super users of the program. We asked them, but I need to clarify that during this time, and probably for the period of about 6 months as we jumped over from that, we had issues where the problems were very irregular, and it was difficult for anyone involved at the upper level to put their finger on why it was happening. So we would have conversations, we would call people at home on their cell phones. It was all over the place. There was no consistent documentation at the time that I remember, because they knew about the issue and they were babysitting it so that every time there was a multi-company, they would look at it. And again, June, July, whatever this was, a lot has changed on how that program works till now and how we do things. We didn't even have some of the positions we have now to do it.
So did you advise anybody that this issue was happening?
I remember talking with Captain Shoopy, he was captain at the time, and I can't remember if he was on the call or if it was something else, just saying that this has happened again. He had the incident number, and that's it. I don't know how much further it went than that, other than probably casually mentioning it to Chief Schroeder as he relieved me that morning, or as I relinquished the shift after I got back. Because I think we face-to-faced here after he came over there. It was an incredibly confusing time, sir, so it's really difficult for me to paint that in a...
Yeah, so there wasn't any specific way that you would report it. There wasn't a person to report it to, a specific way you report
Well,
it.
Captain Shoopy at the time was essentially the liaison for the KFD in this multi-jurisdictional software upgrade, and the people he was dealing with every other agency, from PD to sheriff to jail to records to evidence. We didn't have at the time a garbage email that we would send out or anything on it if we were able to solve it ourselves, and there wasn't any discovery of the issue because we had already discovered it probably a month prior, as this being something that was essentially common, and we understood that it happened. I had several calls where this occurred where I ended up doing the reports my next shift because of the same exact thing. And no further conversation was ever had about it.
So there was no like repair tickets or anything that you need to give out for this type of problem?
Honestly, Cap, I can't remember right now. I cannot recall if at the time we were sending it to an IT group or if we were even doing it after, if an issue was discovered. They were getting flooded with different things, and I know that they didn't want to hear something that they were already working on. I don't know. If it was something new, then I could say yes, but this is not something new that we have been dealing with.
Okay.
So, and I honestly, at that, with how many things have changed between now and then, I cannot accurately tell you what the appropriate way at that point in time would have been to report it. I can tell you now, but that's it.
So when did you finish that report then? You said you did it remotely?
I did it. I logged in. Was this? I believe this was end of July, right? August. I remember when Chief Bigley called me, and he said that there were some insurance people who were looking for it, and I told him what was going on. I was on days off in the middle of the Northwoods without internet access, and I was able to get him, or I told him about the narrative, or I sent it to him. I can't remember exactly how that went. It was either via text or something that I moved over from a drive on my phone, and then I finished it within the narrative and the rest of the report probably within 20 minutes of me getting home from when that was. So it would have been, I'm sorry, I don't remember when I got home. August 3rd, 4th, 5th, early
Okay.
August. A couple days after I talked to Chief Shupe and Chief Bigley, and at the time he had understood that's what I was going to do. That was via phone call. He had called my cell phone. So I finished it from home.
Do you happen to have any of your old performance evaluations?
You mean as far as for the department?
Correct.
I could eventually have access to them. I don't have them immediately with me.
That's something that if you can get access to those, I'd like to see what you have.
What's your interest in that? I mean, they're exceptional, but what's your interest?
It's another thing that the chief is looking into, and specifically 2014's performance evaluation. If you happen to have that,
Aren't those stored in his employee file? Would the chief have access to it?
Honestly, that's where I'd get it from.
Yeah, because we were just talking about that, about requesting his employee file this morning. I mean, it's because I asked him the same question. He's like, I don't have those. And, I said, well, after this interview, we should probably request your employee file. They got turned over within 48 hours.
2014. The only, we have them if we have copies, and I know I've did, when I went through the chief's process, I got a copy of my personnel file. I don't know if those are stored there.
when did you receive a copy of your personnel file?
And by that I mean from the one that's sitting out here. I don't.
A year and a half ago.
Whenever the recruitment for fire chief was.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Starting the fall of 2016, I think.
Okay.
Didn't it?
Well,
I'm pretty sure.
That'd be about right.
Yeah.
Ish.
Because then they made the announcement in early 2017. didn't
Okay.
they?
Yeah, so it'd be about then.
Okay.
Pretty boring in there.
So everything you've told me today is to the best of your knowledge accurate. You're in good, huh?
The best of my knowledge, sir. Right, when there's possibilities for omission, I told you that.
Just want to end by reading one thing to you here,
Okay.
and maybe you'll recognize it. I have stressed to him that I demand honesty and integrity from myself, my peers, my superiors, and my subordinates. I have also illustrated the consequences when these qualities are compromised. A little bit later, without trust we have nothing. So I guess just, I don't know if you recognize that. That's from one of your write-ups from one of your other subordinates. But I think that speaks volumes right there.
I agree. Sir, we're talking about a dog, overtime, media, things that I've done hundreds of times aside from the dog.
I honestly,
I'm not,
I don't think you understand the reason you're here. You're here because of truthfulness, of other things. There's all kinds of issues other than it just being a dog, other than it just being overtime issues, other than it just being that. There's in your line of work and in my line of work.
I understand that, and what I was attempting to illustrate is that during the last year, I was charged with Chief Schroeder to organize President Trump's visit to our community. I'm not going to lie to you about something foolish about a fire report. I've done extremely well in my position for a long period of time, and have been very, very fortunate to be highly regarded regionally and up to the point of being asked to do things at the national level. I stay here because I want to be here. I love this department, and I said that during my chief's interview. I'm extremely happy working here, and in no way do I want to jeopardize that for something foolish.
And I understand what you're getting at. I just am, in your questioning, in your line of questioning, you're talking about inconsistencies as to whether he had made a phone call or whether he received a phone call, whether he put something in an email that said that he offered something or was asked something. Some very, very minor things that I understand once they become memorialized, then you start to ask those questions. I'm not saying any of your questions were inappropriate or ill-aligned. I mean, very professional and no comments. But I do, trying to figure out from when Matt told me what was going on last week, I think Thursday.
It was Friday.
To today, I'm having a hard time, and I know you've been investigating for longer than that. I'm assuming because you've got sounds like you've talked to numerous individuals, collected emails, collected data, asking about timing, different things and whatnot. But I'm trying to understand if it's a representation about something to someone, and it made in good faith, and you're not thinking, you're writing all these things down, you're not thinking about the aspect of whether that person called me or I called that person, or that person asked me specifically, or they heard it on the speaker and they asked, why is that company here? Well, here's the reason why they're here. If someone, for instance, on your June 30th question, with who called who or what was offered, in talking about things that are detrimental to, like putting out facts that are detrimental to the department, my question then becomes, well, in this specific situation, you're asking someone who called who, but something was broadcasted on a radio. These people heard it and asked a question that leads to an honest answer, and the honest answer is a fact that an engine had specifically broken down. He didn't say about, I think you said engine 4 being out of water in our interview here, but he didn't say that to the public. So I believe honesty is, I'm a Kenosha County Court Commissioner, I'm an attorney here, and we take an oath as well. And you guys are both two of the people that we should be putting on pedestals because you help and save people and keep our communities safe. I just don't get. I understand you're saying we don't get why we're here, or I guess the complexity of what. The complexity of what you just inferred to
in what is
substantially more than
what is just written here by him, that what we have in this job is our honesty and our integrity. And this write-up that was done, people don't, cops, I've said it a bunch of times, and I don't even really need to get into much of what cops get in trouble for what they lie about or what they omit. Everybody screws up. Cops, firefighters, everybody. It's
Agreed.
owning
Sure.
it. But when you omit, lie, or cover up things, that's where the issues are.
Okay, and out of the due process of what you're asking, and we started this with, what is he alleging, what is being alleged that Matt has lied about or omitted or covered up?
That's all stuff that we covered in the interview.
Just these things, these 4 issues that were brought up. One of which
and
is
the
was
responses to those.
old. Responses today to those or in the past?
In the past to those.
Okay. Because the one that did bring my question is this overtime issue where he went through a grievance. I was actually, I read through all the grievance stuff, and I was interested to see why that was brought up today, since it was a grievance that was already dealt with in the past. That was one of my questions that I was going to ask, why the grievance was brought up, or why the overtime was brought up when there was a grievance involved, and the grievance was written past the 10-day window it was requested and reported after the 10-day window to write the grievance. So that was my question to it. It was a latent reporting. He went through the grievance process and explained it, and then we explained it again today. But how come the grievance is part of this?
Because it's part of my investigation.
Okay. No, I'm just asking. I'm trying to understand more. I'm trying to get the picture painted, so.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any further questions for him?
Is there anything else you need from me?
Not right now.
Okay. If there's anything that you need from us again or another interview, be happy to comply.
All right.
So this will end the interview. It is
Just before noon, 11:58.
11:58, and we're stopping the interview.